The Martian night was on fire. Bright orange streaks lit up the dark sky above Mars Station Delta 4. Haniel stood outside his workshop, watching the glowing trails of falling debris. He had been tracking the crash of a transport ship for hours. It was supposed to be a boring salvage job: collect metal, scan for valuables, and sell them for parts. That was his life. Lonely, quiet, and simple. But tonight would change everything. As Haniel reached the crash site, the red sand was still warm from burning wreckage. Shattered metal and wires littered the ground. A thin line of smoke drifted up to the stars. He stepped carefully over broken panels, searching for anything worth saving. Then he heard a small whimper, so soft he thought he imagined it. He turned on his helmet light and swept it over the wreckage, his breath caught. Lying in the shadows was a child. She looked no older than 6. Her skin was pale lavender, almost glowing in the light. Long, silver hair clung to her cheeks. Her eyes shone like tiny moons, wide and full of fear. She was curled into a ball, clutching something close to her chest. It was a pendant, cracked and flickering with strange symbols he had never seen. The little girl trembled as he stepped closer. Haniel felt his heart pound. This was no cargo, no scrap metal. This was a lost child. "Hey," he whispered softly, kneeling down so he wouldn't scare her. "It's okay. You're safe now." She flinched at his voice but didn't run. He slowly took off his jacket and wrapped it around her small body. Her eyes blinked at him, tired and confused. Haniel lifted her into his arms, careful not to hurt her. She was so light, like holding a feather. As he carried her back to his rover, he looked up at the stars. Who was she? Where did she come from? He had no answers. But one thing was clear. She needed him. When they got back to Haniel's dom home, he made a warm drink. The girl sniffed it and took a careful sip. She made a funny face, her tongue tingling from the sweetness. Then, slowly, she relaxed. He cleaned the small cuts on her arms and wrapped her in blankets. That night, she slept curled up in a chair by the heater. Haniel sat across from her, watching her breathe. He didn't know her name, her species, or why she was alone. But in that quiet room, he knew one thing deep in his bones. He would protect her. The next morning, he sent messages to the Galactic Council and Mars Station authorities. Weeks passed. No one claimed the child. The crashed ship had no registry. There were no reports of missing passengers or crew. The pendant symbols were unreadable, even with his best scanners. The girl couldn't tell him her name. She just looked at him with those glowing eyes full of silent questions. So he gave her a name himself. He called her Arium, which meant beauty in his mother's tongue. It fit her perfectly, Arium learned quickly. She watched everything Haniel did. She followed him around the workshop, mimicking his movements with her small hands. She loved the warmth of cocoa, even if it made her cough the first few times. And one day, when Haniel handed her a wrench, she looked up at him and whispered her first word, Appa. Father, the word broke something inside him, in a good way. He had been alone for so long. Now he wasn't. As months passed, Arium grew, stronger and happier. She read old books with him, traced blueprints of ships, and learned how to use tools. When she got sick with fevers, Haniel stayed by her side all night, wiping her forehead and whispering that she would be okay. When she had nightmares, he held her hand until she fell back asleep. She called his small dome home our house. She filled the empty rooms with laughter. She carved little stars into the walls and drew pictures of rockets on the floor. Haniel's quiet life became busy and bright. Years slipped by. By age 15, Arium had grown tall, almost taller than Haniel. Crystal-like wings had started to unfold from her back, shimmering with hidden light. She was strong and smart, fixing engines faster than the station's chief mechanic. People on Mars Station called her the Little Star. She called Haniel Lapa with pride. But even in these happy days, Haniel sometimes wondered about the pendant. Late at night, when Arium was asleep, he would sit by her bed and study it. The cracked stone pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Where did it come from? Who had given it to her? Was someone still out there looking for her? Then, On a quiet morning 10 years after that night in the burning Martian sky, the doorbell rang. Haniel wiped grease from his hands and opened the hatch. His heart froze. A woman stood there in a black cloak. Her skin was the same pale lavender as Ariam's, but older and marked by worry. Her silver hair fell over tired eyes that shimmered exactly like Ariam's. The pendant around her neck matched the one Haniel had kept safe for years. "My name is Sohee," she said softly, voice breaking. "I've come for my daughter." Haniel's breath caught. From behind him, Ariam stepped out of the kitchen, a steaming cup of cocoa in her hands. The cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her eyes locked onto the woman's mother.
Us.
She whispered. So Dashi stepped forward, her arms shaking. "My light," she sobbed. "I thought I lost you forever." Mother and daughter fell into each other's arms. Tears streamed down their cheeks. Manuel stood frozen, hands trembling at his sides. His mind spun with fear, confusion, and a quiet ache. Was this the end of the life they built? Would Ariam leave with would he lose his daughter? That night, Sohee sat at their table. The warm glow of the heater flickered around them. Ariam asked 100 questions. Sohee explained how slavers had attacked their ship, how she thought Ariam was dead, how she searched for years, tracing the pendant signal all the way to Mars. Then, in the quiet after midnight, Sohee looked at Haniel with red eyes. "I don't want to take her away," she said, voice cracking. "You raised her, but I have nowhere to go. Please, may I stay?" Haniel sat in stunned silence. His heart ached with hope and fear. Looked at Ariam, who watched him with wide, shining eyes. A single thought echoed in his mind. What makes a family? The silence after Sohee's question felt endless. Haniel sat frozen at the table. The warm light flickered on the walls. Outside, Mars' twin moons rose over the red hills. Ariam looked between the two adults, eyes wide and wet with tears. Sohee's voice trembled. "I don't want to take her away, but I've nowhere to go. I want to stay with you both." Haniel's mind raced. For 10 years, it had been just him and Ariam. They had fixed broken pipes, laughed over burnt pancakes, and fallen asleep reading stories. Could there really be room for one more? He looked at Ariam. She nodded slowly, hope shining in her eyes. He took a deep breath. "Yes, you can stay. We'll find a way to be a family." So he moved into the spare room. The first days were hard. The house felt crowded. Haniel didn't understand Sohee's rituals or the incense she burned, which made the air smell sweet and strange. She didn't understand why he let Ariam drink cocoa or why he never pushed her to practice fighting. They argued over small things, like bedtime, chores, and how much time Ariam should spend in the workshop. But every night, Ariam would sit between them, telling stories of her day. Slowly, the walls between Haniel and Sohee began to crack. They found themselves laughing at Ariam's jokes. They discovered they both loved quiet evenings, watching the stars. One night, Mars Station's alarm wailed. A solar flare had hit the station, cutting power and throwing the gravity fields into chaos. Haniel's heart stopped when he heard Ariam's glider team was still outside on the ridge. Without thinking, he sprinted to the launch pad. The doors flew open, and there was Sohee, already in her flight suit, activating a small drone swarm. Her eyes glowed with fear. They flew out together, hearts racing. The wind howled, sand whipping against their helmets. After an hour of searching, they found Ariam's damaged glider crashed against a rock. Ariam was pinned, her leg bleeding. She was conscious but weak. Haniel grabbed her hand, whispering, "Stay with us, please." So he knelt beside them, pulling a small silver device. From her belt, she pressed it to Ariam's wound. A soft light glowed, sealing the bleeding and knitting the flesh. Ariam gasped, then relaxed, tears falling down her cheeks. When they lifted her into the medbed, Ariam looked at both of them and whispered, "You both came." Haniel nodded, voice shaking. "Of course we did." So he took her other hand. "We always will." After that night, everything changed. They cleared out storage boxes to make space for Sohee's things. Sohee carved patterns of stars and moons from her home world into the walls of her room. She taught Ariam the songs of their people and words from their lost language. Haniel taught them both how to repair Mars Station's hydrocores and how to pilot old cargo haulers. In the evenings, they cooked meals together. So, he showed them recipes from her world, with spices that sparkled like tiny jewels. Haniel taught them how to make simple Martian pancakes, always a bit burnt, but full of love. Ariam teased them both, calling them my two parents. Quiet evening, they sat on the porch, watching the twin moons rise. Ariam lay between them, her head on Sohi's shoulder, feet across Haniel's lap. She looked up at the stars and asked, "Is it strange, having two parents?" Haniel chuckled. "It's rare." Sohi smiled softly, "But it's perfect." Ariam giggled, wings fluttering faintly behind her. Perfect is good. Years passed. The small dome home grew busier. They expanded it, adding new rooms, a bigger workshop, and a garden where blue leaf trees from Sohi's world grew. The scent of their flowers mixed with Mars' dry air, making the place feel like home. Ariam thrived. She graduated at the top of her engineering class. She built her own spacecraft, faster and smarter than any on Mars. She started a company designing exploration ships that could cross star systems. People called her the Crystal Wing Engineer. So he opened a small crystal craft shop in Mars Station. Tourists from across the colonies came to see her beautiful sculptures and hear her sing. Her voice carried the sadness and strength of a mother who had lost everything and found it again. Haniel, after years of planning, finally started writing his book, How to Accidentally Build a Family on Mars. In it, he wrote about loneliness, love, and the strange, wonderful ways a family could come together. On the night of Ariam's first solo deep space mission, the three stood on the landing pad. Her sleek, silver ship glowed under the moonlight. Ariam hugged them both tightly. "I'll come back soon," she promised. "We know," Haniel said. Trying not to cry, "Fly safe, my light," Sully whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They watched the engines fire, the ship lifting into the sky, growing smaller until it disappeared among the stars. The launch pad grew quiet. Haniel and Sohi stood side by side, hands brushing together. They watched the empty sky, the stars blinking like tiny candles. "She's so much more than either of us alone," Sohi said softly, eyes glistening. Haniel nodded. "We did something right." Sohi turned to look at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come back?" He paused, then smiled gently. "I do, but I'm glad you did." She took his hand, squeezing it tight. "So am I." Under the twin moons of Mars, they stood quietly. They had come together from pain and fear, from loneliness and hope. They had built something rare, a family, not born from blood but from love. And as the stars stretched across the Martian sky, they knew they had found each other for a reason. The quiet heart of Mars, and laughter and tears, they were home.